Hey, everybody, and welcome to this next episode of the Filtra.io podcast. On today's episode, we feature a company that I consider to be something of a hidden gem in the Rust community. The company is called Woven by Toyota. As you might expect, Woven by Toyota is part of the larger Toyota group we're all familiar with, but they play a special role in that ecosystem. Woven creates technology products that are then integrated into the vehicles sold by the various Toyota Group OEMs. So they seem to be involved with most of the major trends in the automotive space right now, which made for a really interesting conversation. To learn more about this, I talked to Pete Lavasser, who's a staff software engineer there. Pete has a ton of experience both in the auto industry and with Rust. So we talked a lot about the major products Woven is working on, as well as how and where they're using Rust. This included an exciting announcement about their Rust use that you should really listen for. Pete also leads the Safety Critical Rust Consortium. If you're not familiar, they're doing really important work to streamline the use of Rust in safety critical contexts. So we talked about the outlook for Rust and safety critical domains as well. Overall, it was just awesome to chat with Pete. Now, you all know that at Filter.io, we go out and find Rust jobs and aggregate them for you. At the time of this recording, we found 9 Rust-related jobs at Woven by Toyota. Those are all listed over on Filtra.io, along with over 1,000 other cool Rust jobs. So if you want to work with Rust, go over there and take a look. With that little pitch, I'll finish here and leave you to enjoy my conversation with Pete. Okay, so most of our audience will know what Toyota is. I think very few people haven't experienced Toyota in their lives. I think fewer people will know what Woven by Toyota is. So can you start by just describing what Woven is?
Yeah, sure. So I'll try to break this down a little bit. So you can think of Woven by Toyota as this means to support Toyota's transformation into a mobility company, helping to, improve and realize well-being for all. So there's a few different business units within Woven, AD ADAS, Arene, Woven City, and these are all kind of innovating in various spaces to be kind of a tip of the spear, if you will, to help with this transformation process. And yeah, if you're interested in like any of the particulars, I can go into more detail. And yeah, AD, ADAS, like automated driving, advanced driver assistance systems for folks that, may not be familiar with like kind of the jargon.
Right, I guess you spend a lot of time in this space, so good to clarify for those who are, in other industries. So, um, I guess let's talk a little bit about something that I discovered when I was doing some of my research, which is something new that Woven's been working a lot on called Arene. Is that the way to pronounce it? Arene?
Yeah, yeah, Irene, that's correct.
So what's Arene?
Sure, yeah. So it's a great question. It's a name, right? So there's a bunch of things that fall under this. So Arene is built to enable this kind of like safe, secure, scalable development of software, and it allows a few different things. So reusability for multiple vehicles, multiple different applications, trying to shorten that time horizon for getting to market, as that's become, like an important thing in the automotive, industry. And then also supporting data collection for future development. And there's a number of different offerings that fall under these. So, for example, there's like software development kits, SDKs, there's tools, and there's data. So, the idea is that Arena SDKs help you kind of like unify the software development lifecycle for automotive, and that product lifecycle. And Arena tooling allows testing, visualization, and a really important thing is removing the need for physical prototyping. So having things and having physical devices. And then Arena data is this kind of a holistic and consent-based approach to shuttle data back and forth from say like vehicle to like back end, and it supports the ability to update onboard software. So yeah, like To that end, there's like a bunch of different things. So like I'm kind of like going through the layers, right? So there's the high level stuff, then there's okay, there's these sort of products or offerings, and then what does that actually entail? So to that end, there's like
Yeah.
things going on around communication and middleware, simulation, hardware and software co-design, as well as SILs and HILs, where SIL is software in the loop and HIL is hardware in the loop. These all kind of come together, like all of these efforts come together into those products I mentioned earlier about Arene SDKs, Arene tools, and Arene data. And they're really a means to an end to help keep the quality bar high as expected by anyone who drives a Toyota, while also enabling the ability to ship features more quickly and more efficiently to the vehicle. And yeah, there's this backdrop, right? You might be aware that automotive is kind of in this space right now. Things are shifting. There's this concept of software-defined vehicles or SDVs, where the idea is like, yeah, we should be have the ability to be more flexible and uh, be able to deploy software more easily to vehicles. And so Arene aims to enable software-defined vehicles, keeping safety always in mind, and ensuring that the needs of our customers are met.
There's so much in
There's
what
so
you
much you could dig
said.
into, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, well, I guess so. This is a platform basically that I imagine Toyota plans to implement in like all of its future vehicles. Is that the right way to understand this, or?
Yeah, exactly. So the idea is that Woven by Toyota can work with the other partners within Toyota Group, like Toyota Motor Corporation in Japan, like Toyota Motors North America, TM&A in North America, and all around the world to be able to bring Arene to the various like customer markets that we have.
Cool. So, well, one of the things that was popping into my head as you were talking about this is I know that with a lot of vehicle software, and maybe I'll sound relatively uninformed saying this, I might be kind of behind with this information. A lot of vehicle software takes, um, it's hard to update. Like over the air updates, like you would get to a laptop or something, are not super common. Is that something that comes with Arene, or maybe that's something Toyota already has?
Yeah, so that is something that Arene does enable and makes more seamless and more kind of uniform and consistent across all of the different vehicle platforms, right? So the idea is that yeah, Arene will enable software developers, software engineers, folks that are working on software for vehicles to be better equipped to use similar tools and technologies, no matter, if they're working on the newest RAV4 or what it might be the software for.
Makes sense. So the other thing that I don't know that I was able to really find information about this, or maybe I did when I was researching, but I'll ask. Um, what stage is Arene in? Like, have a lot of the components been shipped in vehicles that are out there that we see on the road today, or is this more of a new thing?
Yeah, so actually, the 2026 RAV4 in North America has baked into it some of these innovations that have been happening over the last little bit within Arene to help streamline and sort of modernize the way these software and services interact. Um, and so, like, one thing in particular is there's an alignment around these SDKs, as I'd mentioned, these Arena SDKs from developers within both like Woven by Toyota and Toyota Motor Corporation on how to best like interoperate with a bunch of software on this large global scale.
Okay, that makes sense. I was remembering that I thought I saw something about the RAV4.
Yep,
So
yep. It was
2026 RAV.
relatively recent. Yeah, relatively recent, maybe in the last couple months or so. Yeah.
Cool. Um, well, and the RAV4, that's like, is that Toyota's best-selling platform potentially? It seems like it's a very popular car.
I think it's popular, right? Like, I think people in North America, they like to sit a little higher. They like to have an SUV experience. So I think it's very popular for that reason. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Arene, uh, well, actually, I have another follow-up question because just listening to your description, it expanded my understanding of Arene greatly. So, um, you were talking about how it kind of includes tooling and, there's all these different pieces that fall under this umbrella of Arene. Um, so is it something where you're kind of adding pieces as you go and more of these pieces will be in cars further down the road?
Yes, I mean, you can imagine it this way that Woven by Toyota works on Arene, works with Toyota Motor Corporation, and comes up with concepts that meet the needs of the OEM, right? Of TMC. And it's kind of like a product company, right? Put products on the shelf, right? Say, okay, so you're facing a certain issue. Okay, we will propose, a product that we could build which could solve this issue, and it could solve the issue of, many OEMs, many automakers, should they so choose to use these types of things. And so, put it on the shelf, kind of do some development, put it on the shelf, and then discuss. And these sorts of things will start more and more of these things will start to come online and start to be used over time. So some pieces of Arene, a good number of them are on the 2026 RAV4, but there's also other things that will be coming and other things that are planned to be coming that will help kind of improve that developer experience as well.
Okay, interesting. So your customer is really the the OEMs. Even though you're kind of all under that Toyota umbrella, you're sort of specifically solving the problems that the people designing those vehicles have.
Yeah, it's a really kind of amazing and interesting collaborative relationship because I think a lot of automotive suppliers they would love to have the kind of relationship that we have with Toyota Motor Corporation because we can work a lot more closely and understand their needs and build something that will fill the needs of many OEMs, many automakers because despite what many might think, a lot of the problems faced by the automakers are the same, right? That's why you see things like Eclipse S Core getting announced, where you've got two major European OEMs, you've got Mercedes and BMW kind of pitching in and saying, let's do open source stuff, let's build the common things that are not really value add but are expected. So yeah, that's the idea. Is we work closely with TMC and other companies like within the Toyota group. And by doing that, we can understand really the needs and try to build solutions that should suit any automaker, any OEM.
So outside of Arene, are there other big wins or milestones for Woven by Toyota that you would point out?
Yeah, so I mean, Woven by Toyota has been involved with, as I mentioned, the AD ADAS aspect. While I don't work like super closely in that domain, I do know that some of the efforts that have been going on um, related to like the active safety, or you might call it ADAS, depending on which company you're talking about. But some of these aspects, Woven by Toyota has been involved with and has been helping to improve over time. Things like trying to make simulators and trying to make environments where things are easier to test, so that you can have kind of a faster iteration cycle while you're developing an algorithm to be used for automated driving or advanced driver assistance systems.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a huge, well, it's a huge push for any auto company right now, I'm sure, right? Everybody's trying to figure that out. Um, well, I wanted to ask about you specifically. I was going to ask about kind of some of the interesting technical problems that you've gotten to work on. Before I ask that, could you actually provide a little background of what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I work for a team called Technologies and Standards, which exists within Arene, which exists within Woven by Toyota. And so the Technologies and Standards team has two primary things, technologies and standards. So as it says in the name, what it says on the tin. So standards, for example, being crafting of coding guidelines, which are suitable for the programming languages, which are used for both on vehicle and off vehicle. So that's sort of the standards piece of it. And then the technology piece of it is Woven by Toyota itself is like trying to, bring the future and, as I said, be the tip of that spear. But within even Woven, there's technologies and standards, which is trying to be even maybe like a step or two ahead of that, and is involved with some things that are more like in the open or open source and these sorts of things, and trying to be more collaborative and part of the community so that, we can better understand what others are doing and what we can do to also support, and make things happen. So yeah, so for myself in particular, I work primarily on how can we expand the ability to use Rust within the vehicle. So today, Rust is already a pretty nice language to use for non-safety critical domains like infotainment, right? Like, the little screen you have like in the center on most cars, and you can kind of touch on stuff there. So it's already a pretty good fit for that. But there are some gaps when it comes to using it in everywhere on the car where like there's this standard called ISO 26262 that governs like both the tools that are used and how we develop safety critical software for automotive. And so that piece of it is like there's still some gaps that exist there for how do we get software deployed in the right way for safety critical applications. And so that's another piece that I work pretty actively on trying to close. So I'm lead of the Safety Critical Rust Consortium, where yeah, we have a bunch of people involved from different automakers and airplane manufacturers, and there's a nuclear company, there's a rail company in there, all trying to solve some of these similar problems that we're facing with, or similar gaps that we're facing with trying to bring software into safety critical systems.
Yeah, that's um it's all super interesting. I've been talking to a bunch of people from, well, I think a lot of people that are members of the consortium, but people in that sort of embedded Rust in domains where it's safety critical, and um it's just a very interesting moment in the maturity of the language and ecosystem, because you can very clearly see, and I think we'll maybe talk about this in a minute, why you want Rust for these applications. Um, but there's some significant procedural sort of elements that need to be filled in to make that happen. So I think that's very interesting. Um, are there specific kind of technical problems that you've taken on as part of this work, or your work as at Woven, that you would talk about?
Sure, yeah. So one key thing that needs to exist to put software in a safety critical context based on ISO 26262 is you need to have a coding standard for whatever language you're using. So this piece of it, we realized early on in the consortium was an important piece, and it was not there yet. And what we had found when we started talking to members that were joining the consortium is that kind of people were building their own standards like within their companies, right? Just building their own coding standards. And like that's okay, right? Like that's, get the work done, okay. But now that we have this consortium, can we do this in a collaborative manner? Can we do this together? Can we do it in the open so that we can all benefit? And so, in addition to leading the consortium, I also am chair of the coding guidelines subcommittee. And so this is a group that is focused entirely on shipping an artifact that can be used by, say, an automotive company or an aerospace company to bring their software, right? They can bring their software together in a bundle with these coding guidelines, and they can say, hey, yeah, we followed these coding guidelines with this software. So therefore, you, safety assessor, should closely look at this. And then if you think it's okay, then great, safety certify. So yeah, this is a piece of it that I'm pretty actively involved with. We have a repo out there. You can take a look at if you're interested for like our progress and how we're coming along.
Um, I'm hearing you talk about Rust and all this work to make it work for safety critical. And it's making me think about a question that I wanted to ask anyway, which is like where does Rust fit in the stack for Woven right now? Because I imagine there are places where it can be put today and places where there's still work that needs to be done for it to be able to be used there. So where is Rust? Where is it not? How does it fit in the stack?
Yeah, yeah. So Rust historically for us has been kind of an off-vehicle technology. We've leveraged in areas which require what Rust is great at: security, stability, reliability. Um, so a good example of this might be there's a simulation engine that has been built by a team within Woven by Toyota that's written entirely in Rust for stability and extensibility reasons. Uh, and this was written in Rust, I think a few years back, just sort of as a proof of concept, just to see like, is this possible? What are the shortcomings potentially of Rust? But in fact, it took off, and it now looks like quite a viable path for doing the kind of work that involves like a lot of number crunching and that also must be very reliable. And the other thing that I'll point out is yeah, this is I think this is the announcement of this actually, but Rust is actually today shipping in the 2026 RAV4 in North America. So there is Rust in the cars that are rolling around currently that are shipped by Toyota. So there's a group, TCNA, Toyota Connected North America. Their UI UX team, nominally responsible for delivering customer experiences, in the vehicle on the infotainment. But they found Rust to be a really strong choice for this kind of, I'll call it like a vehicle interface layer between sort of the software underneath that's a bunch of services, which are sort of managing vehicle resources and activities. And then that really allowed their designers to focus more on the UI and the UX and building a customer experience that was engaging. And they found that Rust served their needs quite nicely here because it's sort of like this rock solid kind of stable layer that let these UI UX designers really focus on that aspect of building a good experience.
That's awesome. Well, I guess people heard it here first. That I think there's something like just satisfying about hearing that Rust shipped on a product that we all see rolling around. So that's cool. That's very cool. Um, well, so I alluded to this a minute ago. Something that I think about when I think about Rust for automotive applications is Rust is kind of all about safety, reliability, these things that seem like, I mean, safety is a value that obviously is very important in the automotive space in terms of safety in the physical world. Um, so what I wanted to ask was like, are there ways that you see the safety guarantees that you get from Rust translating to kind of physical real world safety with these vehicles, or am I inventing that connection?
No, no, yeah, yeah, you're exactly right. I think it's a good point to bring up. So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but there are certain industries like automotive, aerospace, nuclear that are safety critical, and they have, for good reason, they have regulatory burden in order to keep people safe and prevent destruction of property, right? And so, in particular, there's, as I mentioned, there's ISO 26262 for automotive. And this kind of prescribes like an increasing level of safety criticality as we go down the list from ASIL QM, which is quality managed, I believe, to ASIL A, B, C, D. So as you get to D, that is the highest level of safety criticality. And yeah, in my mind, when I look at Rust and I look at what it provides, the fact that it brings you memory safety, thread safety, type safety, these are all things that were built into it with the idea of they should provide a secure experience for people that are using like a web browser, right? Like this sort of its initial application. These things are all really like dovetail nicely into the needs of safety critical systems. So like if you kind of like look out there now, you'll see that others are starting to feel similarly, and like tool vendors, compiler vendors are starting to step up. And so you can now see that there's tools available and compilers available for Rust targeting specifically the safety critical industry. Like if you look out there, you can see Ferrocene, Ganap Pro for Rust, and the High-Tech compiler. So these are like good signs, along with seeing that, for example, yeah, like Volvo Cars, also has like a low power ECU that has Rust on it. And yeah, and so there's a lot of activity that's happening here. I think there's a lot of people that are thinking the same way, that Rust's qualities make it a natural fit for safety critical systems. And so that's where you see the thing that got started last year, like I mentioned, the Safety Critical Rust Consortium. So I think we have around like 170 members or something now, and it's very diverse across different industries. Yeah, so I think you're seeing the right things. Like things are kind of trending in that direction. And so what I feel like is certain industries that may take longer than others, depending. But I have already heard about, for example, like some medical device manufacturers are starting to use Rust rather than other languages. So yeah, it's definitely coming along.
That's awesome. 170 members is a lot bigger than I thought it was. So that's kind of exciting to hear. Um, so if we come out of the safety realm for a minute and just talk about Rust and automotive generally, um, what do you see as the outlook for Rust in that space? What are you seeing and hearing about adoption?
Yeah, yeah. So I had touched on this a little bit earlier, but there's this Eclipse S Core project that's sort of hosted underneath the Eclipse Foundation and then underneath the Eclipse Software Defined Vehicle Working Group. And this is there was like a memorandum of understanding that was signed, I think a few months back, maybe over the summer, of a couple of big auto players and then a bunch of suppliers saying, yes, we're going to work together in the open. We're going to build these common shared pieces that we need. And in fact, in the Eclipse SDV working group, there's a bunch of other projects that are written in Rust as well. Like there's Eclipse Cuxa, which is like a data broker based off of Covisa VSS. So it's kind of like a way of shipping data around within the vehicle and out of the vehicle in a specified format. There's Eclipse Onkaios, which is like a kind of like a workload orchestrator for kind of embedded devices. When I say embedded, I mean like not microcontrollers, but like embedded Linux kind of environments. There is Eclipse U Protocol, which is you can think of it kind of like in a kind of an abstraction, kind of a service mesh, and it's sort of in the name of U Protocol. You can bring your own protocol to put underneath it, but you get like a consistent developer experience for anyone using it. There's Eclipse IsoRix 2. So this is a zero copy shared memory transport that is it seems very promising for using in the vehicle to be able to shuttle data around without making a bunch of copies, which can be very important when you're running on automotive grade hardware that is more expensive than consumer grade hardware. So that's always a question of bill of materials cost, BOM cost. And so using something like IsoRix 2, can save you some cycles, save you some copies. And there's also Eclipse Zeno. So Zeno is it's a transport. It's kind of like a pub sub request response mechanism. Um, and it's you can use a bunch of other protocols underneath it as well. There's actually at Oxidize Conf, Ansgar of the Eclipse Foundation, he shared that these days there's around 35% of the code in the Eclipse SDV repos are actually written in Rust. So this is really cool to hear about. And I think I don't know, maybe the talks have been released yet, maybe not, but yeah, it was really cool to hear about this. And there's also this Rust special interest group, or Rust SIG, that's in the Eclipse SDV working group. And so we kind of like have this space where people that are in the automotive domain that are like using Rust or curious about Rust can kind of show up and talk about things. And we hold some kind of office hours as well where people can stop by if they're curious. We've had a couple automakers come by, we've had a supplier come by and kind of just be like, hey, how do I like, where should I start? And so it's kind of a good place for sharing that information, kind of broadening kind of the base of people that understand how to use Rust in automotive. So for me personally, it's more a question of like, when and not if, when it comes to automotive, at least for using Rust.
Yeah, again, I feel like I'm going to say this a lot of times in this interview, but it feels like an exciting moment. It's like there's enough that's happened where we can see that this is a real trend that's beginning, but you can also see that it's just the beginning. So that's pretty cool. Um, so I want to ask a little bit more about Woven by Toyota and kind of the work there. Um, so we talked a little bit about how it occupies this interesting space within all of Toyota where it's kind of this more of this research and development lab. Does that make the culture differ in any significant ways from like a more typical corporate environment?
Sure. So first thing I'll say is that there also is a company called Toyota Research Institute, and they are the folks that are sort of truly doing, like pure R&D, right? Like our R&D that is a little bit further out, right? Kind of like fundamental R&D. But when it comes to Woven, like it's yes and no, which is the perfect answer, right? Like it's a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B. So in certain ways, Woven by Toyota is like many automotive companies. We develop, cyber physical systems. We've got hardware, we've got software that are involved. The environment is sensed. Things are actuating, like, braking and steering is happening. But on the other hand, I found that kind of the spirit at Woven by Toyota to be uniquely um, like empowering in a way for individuals to try to figure new things out and explore new avenues to accomplish things. So an example of that I had kind of when I first started at Woven is there was a discussion about which technology to use to implement a tool that was needed. And I said, okay, like that's interesting. And I proposed this parallel path where a learning at the end of it could be captured. So one team would implement the tool in C++, and I would implement the tool in Rust. And by going through this process, we kind of learned some valuable lessons about how efficiently we can develop and ship things in Rust. And we still, we're able to capture the needs of our customers and get them software delivered on time.
All right, well, I you dangled that in front of me, so I gotta ask, what did you learn about, efficiency and Rust? Because I know this is a big topic
Yeah.
for the community as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest that I've been learning Rust and using Rust for quite a number of years now. I think since 2017 or so. So I knew a bit about Rust and I was able to use it somewhat effectively. But what I found is that you know I as a single individual was able to kind of ship and deliver a piece of software before a team of other individuals were able to ship that same software with similar features in C++. And that's not to say that C++ is a bad language, it shouldn't be used or anything like this, but just that some of the some of the tooling, some of the expectations, some of what's available are different. And you can reach out to, for example, Crates.io. You can look out there. There's many, many library crates that already exist to do many, many things that this team that was using C++ ended up having to sort of build themselves or kind of pull together from resources that were not as easily available. So this was definitely an aspect that I found was helpful for being very efficient and cutting code very quickly.
That's cool. People are gonna go crazy for that. People will love to hear that. Um, and I think it's interesting that you point out, Crates.io and kind of the tooling around the language. I think that actually matters a lot for productivity. Like
I totally agree. Yeah. Yeah, like
what you
I was giving some training about Rust over the summer at Woven by Toyota in the Ann Arbor office, and I was like, "Hey, Rust is this great language. Like show up, let's I'll teach you all about it." and I was using the comprehensive Rust set of tutorials from the Google Android team. And so I was going through the things, and I almost felt like I could mint like a saying from this. It's like lure them in with memory safety, and they'll stay for like the tooling in the ecosystem. Because I will tell you that when I showed the ability to use documentation tests, doc tests, where you can have in the documentation that's generated, you can have examples which are guaranteed to compile and guaranteed to work. It blew people's minds. They're like, "What? That's amazing!" So yeah, it's definitely people hear about some of the other aspects of Rust that are maybe really appealing for the domain that we're in, like automotive, safety critical, but then they kind of take a step in and they're like, oh wait, like all these tools are super helpful, and just help them move very quickly.
Yeah. And I do think, I mean, like, I'm not saying that there's nothing to the claims that people make about there being a bit of a learning curve, learning how to work with the borrow checker and all of these things. That is real. But I think your case is a great example. Once you've kind of done that climbing, um, all of the other things, the tooling, the fact that you can use the compiler to actually kind of help you fix things and make refactors and things, you start to kind of speed up from there. And so I think that's a very cool, underappreciated aspect of working in Rust.
Yeah, definitely. Like when so I had a chance to join the Rust Vision Doc team that's in the Rust project, and as a part of that, I might have went overboard, but I interviewed like 20, 25 people that are using Rust and Safety Critical or would like to be using Rust and Safety Critical, and yeah, it was just so fascinating learning from them that like yeah, that's sort of what it is, that what got them in the door is not what sort of maybe kept them necessarily. Like they got all these ecosystem benefits and they were able to sort of deliver software that had less defects and faster than the equivalent software they would have written using other languages in the past. And this is just like something that I heard almost universally. But yeah, if you're interested in like learning a little bit more about that, Jack and Nico gave a talk at RustConf 2025 about this, and they shared some details, so you can check that out.
Super cool. So, um, continuing with the thread of your work at Woven, you mentioned that part of the work you're actually actuating things and stuff. I wanted to ask more about that. Like how much uh hardware are you dealing with and moving around, or is it very software heavy? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that automotive, you very much need to think about hardware, software, co-design, right? Like, um, the idea that you can be just like a pure software company if you're in the automotive industry, I think is a bit of a folly. And so we really have embraced that. And so from the beginning, we're thinking about how what we're writing will work on the relevant target hardware. We get prototype hardware in order to build and run things on in order to make sure that when we ship it to customers that this is going to be effective and useful for them. So there's plenty of hardware involved. In my day to day, there's not, but I did spend my years at other companies doing things like actively writing code while I'm on the test track, to then test something when I go another loop. I put my time in there, but these days mostly I'm not interacting with a ton of hardware. But I do see those things, in the offices, and it is really cool. But I'm personally not doing it.
Yeah, that's cool. I always like to ask about that because I just think for a lot of people that are software engineers and spend a lot of time in a cubicle, hands-on keyboard, it's kind of fun to think about what it might be like to have that different aspect to your work. Um, well, I guess kind of wrapping this up about kind of culture at Woven, is there anything else unusual about working there or the culture there that you would point out?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I've worked at a few other automotive companies. And I'd say that Woven by Toyota is one of the most deeply technical places that I've worked. When it comes to sort of drafting out designs, keeping in mind, production constraints and future evolution, gathering together those that will be users of this software and hardware eventually, and to get together and offer up feedback. This has been an interesting experience. It's very unique amongst the automotive industry, where it's much more typical to have fairly rigid hardware and software designs created by a systems engineer, which may be very far removed from the requirements they write, to the software delivery team that will eventually implement this. And I've seen things where the software, the systems engineering team could finish the work in other companies, and then it might be months, potentially years before the software, like a single line of software is actually written by a team. And this is not uncommon to see in the automotive industry, but at Woven by Toyota, there seems to be kind of a tighter collaboration kind of cycle between the different teams, between sort of systems and architecture and software delivery teams than other places that I've worked. And I've seen it working out well, and we've been shipping. So I think it's a great kind of cultural aspect of Woven by Toyota.
Awesome. Um, so to ask more specifically about hiring, how people might try to get a job at Woven or something like that. When it comes to hiring, what are the key things that you're looking for or that Woven's looking for?
Sure, yeah. So Woven by Toyota has an internship program and hires successful interns and converts them to full time. That is an avenue, definitely. And Woven also hires experienced professionals. So for interns, I think generally Woven by Toyota is looking for a lot of curiosity, kind of some spark there, having touched multiple parts, not only software but also hardware as well. And if I take an example, if I zoom into Arene, for example, I mentioned a bunch of things that we do, right? So I think that having touched a bit of middleware, right? Like having maybe interacted with it, understood what middleware is, maybe had to toy with it or submit a patch to some open source project related to it, dealing with communications protocols, applications development, someone that is sort of the classical like T-shaped individual, right? Like they may be very deep in some aspect, but they've also touched and been involved with other aspects of sort of the software and hardware development process. When it comes to experienced individuals, I think that still holds, a T-shaped individual, but probably I don't know, their T is a little bit thicker here and maybe a little bit deeper here, or, the proportions get a little bit stranger or more interesting, but I think it still holds generally. Ideally, you've touched multiple different parts of the software stack, hardware stack, and you kind of maintain this level of curiosity that is, I think, really beneficial in Woven by Toyota. So, given that. Uh, Given how we develop things and what we develop, it's very important to have that capability and that spark and that curiosity, because we work on many different things, and so depending on the time of the year or which year, you may be working on something completely different from what you were working on last year. So the ability to kind of pivot and learn is definitely a plus in my book when it comes to looking for folks that we'd like to join us.
Cool. So, um, I guess if we were to speak right to the individuals that might be interested in this kind of thing, I mean, obviously, Woven, it's cars, it's self-driving, it's a lot of very cool stuff. Um, so I'm sure there's tons of people who are interested in this field and getting into this type of work. What advice would you have for someone who's in that kind of position? Whether they're, maybe there's one profile that's someone early career that's trying to get into it, and another person that's trying to maybe move over into the industry.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, Woven by Toyota is like, again, one of the most technical companies that I've ever worked for. And they're actually like world renowned and world class experts that call their home Woven by Toyota, which is really cool. You can ask people that are, experts about something these questions. And yeah, so if you're say like earlier on in your career, again, like try to keep a wide lens, right? Like try to keep an open mind and try to maintain that curiosity and be curious and ask why things are the way they are and try to touch a bunch of different things. I had the good fortune early in my career to work on like R&D teams and advanced engineering teams, and so this kind of let me like go deep on something for like 6 months to a year and then kind of like pivot and do other things. And so I got to touch a bunch of different things and learn various things that I think if you were, say, to maybe like join a team and just work on that team for 6 years, you may learn something incredibly deeply, but may have no idea about the rest of the development process or software or hardware. So I would definitely say like keep an open mind. Like if you are interested in getting involved, one thing that you could do is look into open source software and look into things that are going on in the Eclipse SDV working group. Woven by Toyota actually has this like strong interest in being involved in open source communities and initiatives. Since if we work together, if we collaboratively implement things upstream, this has the greatest potential to improve Toyota Group's entire supply base who may be using that software. So, for example, we have compiler engineers at Woven by Toyota that are active contributors to the LLVM and Clang projects, right? Um, we also have the Safety Critical Rust Consortium, where Woven by Toyota was a founding member. And it's a place where, yeah, we work broadly with many that want to see Rust succeed. So, yeah, if you're interested in sort of finding your way to Woven by Toyota, yeah, keep an open mind, explore broadly, look into interesting open source projects that might be related to automotive, and yeah, just keep kind of investigating and playing around.
Sound advice, it seems like, from the outside. Um, well, I feel I feel pretty happy with everything we've been able to discuss. Is there anything else that you would want to mention or discuss or leave our audience with?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say that I want to really thank you for having me out here to discuss this stuff. And there's a bit of a thought process that like Rust is a certain thing or this certain thing. But what I've learned from the Rust Vision Doc and doing a bunch of interviews of people that are in safety critical and not, and all sorts of different ways of using Rust, is that Rust is a lot more broad, and a lot more broadly applicable to writing foundational software. And so, yeah, if you're interested in using Rust where you're at, if you're interested in trying it out, um, Yuri of Rivian, he actually gave a nice talk at RustConf 2025 all about kind of like bringing new technologies into a company and how to adapt them and how to scale them. So I found his talk really interesting and insightful. So, yeah, take a look at that if you're kind of interested in using Rust at work and are trying to figure out how you might go about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pete, and thanks for all you do for the community as well.
Yeah, well, hey, thanks for having me.